If there's one good thing about the dark and dismal onset of winter, it's the fact that Christmas is on its way. As the 1st of December approaches, even the grown-ups have to admit that Christmas is coming, and everyone can begin the preparations for the very best day of the whole year. The countdown to December the 25th is almost as much fun the whole world over as the celebration of Christmas itself. But have you ever wondered why this particular date on the calendar is so important? As we look at this traditional nativity scene with Mary, Joseph and baby Jesus in the manger, the obvious answer is that it's Jesus' birthday, though this isn't strictly the case. No one knows for sure the actual date, so a very long time ago, all the people of the Christian religion got together and agreed on this special day for Christmas. But there'd been celebrations at this time of the year long before anyone had ever heard about the events that took place in a Bethlehem stable. The Midwinter Festival was how folk from ages past cheered themselves up in the dark winter months. Can you imagine life without electricity? No television seems a horrible prospect. But way back then, nobody even had light or heating, except for a flickering candle and a burning fire. Everybody used to look forward to the longer days of spring, and halfway through the winter they'd bring in evergreen branches from outside and join together with the neighbours to have a party. People believed that this would encourage the winter to turn to spring all the sooner, bringing prosperity to the house and all who lived in it. Food was also very important, because nothing grew in the winter and people had to eat what they'd stored away. It was all a bit boring, and they looked forward to fresh supplies when the weather got better, so creating great winter feasts out of what they had certainly helped to pass the time pleasantly and make meals a bit more tasty. Lots of our Christmas customs date back to these early festivals, and as you're about to find out, they're still popular to this very day. Yet the most important Christmas character of them all hasn't even been mentioned. Father Christmas, Santa Claus, or Saint Nicholas, call him whatever you like, is the one person we all wait for on Christmas Eve. This old, cheery, white-bearded chap, carrying a sack of presents for good children everywhere, is anticipated with delight each year. And on Christmas morning, the brightly coloured gifts under the tree, or stuffed bulging stockings at the foot of the bed, let us know that the great man has visited. With no time to waste, there are lots of things that need to be done before Father Christmas arrives, and perhaps this year we can discover a little bit more about him. Instead of waiting for Santa Claus to come to us, we're going off on a magical, mystical journey to find him in his snowy homeland, where he works all year long for just one very special night. So, where do we begin? Well, Advent calendars are a very good place to start. Opening the first box on the very first day of December puts everyone in a very happy mood, especially if a chocolate treat is hidden behind the doors. But this is a very new addition to Advent calendars, which celebrate all the days of December leading up to Christmas Eve. It always used to be that the last picture showed Mary, Joseph and the baby Jesus. But you never know what it's going to be these days, which makes it all the more interesting. If an Advent calendar is a good way of counting down to Christmas, then making this programme into an Advent calendar on your television would be really good fun. Our first picture has been the Advent calendar itself, getting us ready to start the preparations for Christmas. But our second picture shows something that we all know and love, to send and to receive. What can be nicer than getting up on a December morning to find the postman has delivered a pile of Christmas cards to your door? Even the stamps are likely to have Christmas pictures on them, making the envelopes even more inviting. You really do know that Christmas is on the way when the cards start to arrive, and there are all sorts of pictures to look out for. Santa Claus is very popular, so are his reindeer. Holly is nice, and Christmas bells, and some cards even have funny jokes on them. People have been sending Christmas cards to each other for more than 150 years now, so let's have a look at the type of cards that they used to send. Some of them seem a bit strange to us today, and the cards with Father Christmas on look nothing like the jolly ones we're used to. A lot of them are actually postcards with messages written on the back, and the actual cards that were sent in envelopes are very small indeed. The man who invented the Christmas card was a very clever chap who didn't like writing letters very much, and in his day you were expected to write letters to all your friends and relations at Christmas. So he got an artist to paint him a picture, added a message which said, "Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you," and then he printed lots of copies. It took a while for the idea to catch on commercially, but the man never had to write a Christmas letter again. In Britain today, more than 1,000 million Christmas cards are sent through the month of December, keeping all the postmen and women very busy. The third image to pop up on our Advent calendar is a very familiar little bird, the robin. And of all the birds in Britain, it's the one most associated with Christmas. You'll see robins on many Christmas cards, especially the early ones, because the postmen of the day used to wear red waistcoats, and so they got the nickname robins. Of course, as they were the people responsible for bringing the Christmas post, pictures of robins, sometimes even carrying post bags, started to appear on cards. But if we take a closer look at the robin, there are lots of other reasons for him being so popular at Christmas time. Now, Robin Redbreast, as he's often fondly known, is a friendly little bird, and particularly in the winter months when food gets difficult to find, he'll come very close to people to try and find something to eat. Robins are also very inquisitive, so you're far more likely to see them in the garden than the shyer birds that keep away from us. As well as being a bird that everyone will see at Christmas time, there are quite a few old stories that are told about robins. Some people say that there were robins in the stable where Jesus was born, and because of it being cold, Joseph went out to gather more wood for the fire. It took him a long time, and it seemed as if the fire was going to go out before he got back. Mary did her best to keep the fire alight, but it was hopeless until the little birds realised what was happening. They flew down and started to flap their wings above the fire to stop it dying, just long enough for Joseph to return. But the flames from the fire turned their little chests red, and ever since the robin has always been famous for being so brightly coloured. Red is often associated with fire and flames, and there are much older legends about the robin. Ancient tribes believed that the robin was the fire bringer, and so long as you saw these little birds in the middle of winter, there would be fire for heat and light through the long dark nights. Early man was very superstitious about the robin, and anybody who killed or injured one was in very big trouble. Even today, it's considered bad luck if anything unfortunate happens to a robin, and people try extremely hard to look after them. So next time you see a robin on a Christmas card or out in the garden, just remember what a very special little bird he really is. By the time the 4th of December arrives, everyone is starting to think about Christmas decorations, and our next picture shows one of the best loved decorations of them all. The green spiky leaves and red berries of holly appear as often on Christmas cards as robins do, and this truly beautiful evergreen is one of the most traditional of our modern day decorations. Bringing holly into the house in the depths of winter dates back to Roman times, signifying good health for the year ahead. If you were given a gift of holly, it was intended as a good wish for your future. Today, Christmas wreaths of holly hung cheerfully on the door are a common sight wherever you go, and these inviting decorations actually originate from this ancient custom. Although most people now buy their own holly wreath for it really to work and bring health and happiness to the household, it, by rights, should have been given to you as a present. With the passage of time, a lot of people no longer bring holly inside the house at Christmas time, preferring to use paper decorations instead. There are all sorts of brightly coloured garlands to dangle from the ceiling, and paper chains are great fun to make, as well as to drape around the room. Even if you don't manage to get holly for Christmas, the 5th picture that's on our Advent calendar shows a plant that you most definitely will see wherever you go visiting at this time of the year. This is mistletoe, growing in the wild, and you can see great bunches of it living on these trees, and of all the plants, it is the one that is best known at Christmas time. It's traditional for people to kiss under the mistletoe as a very special way of greeting each other at Christmas. And when this was first introduced, a little peck on the cheek was as far as matters were allowed to go. But as people got used to the idea, they wanted to do more and more kissing under the mistletoe, and things got a bit out of control. Then a new custom was brought in, which meant that each time someone had a kiss, one of the white berries had to be removed from the mistletoe above their heads. When all the berries had gone, no more kissing. This is why people today are very careful about choosing the mistletoe to hang up in their houses as a kissing bough, picking out the branches with as many berries as they can possibly find. It's one sure way to make certain of having a very, very happy Christmas. December the 6th is a very important day on our Advent calendar because it's the festival of St. Nicholas. A lot of people still call Father Christmas St. Nicholas, and many of our Christmas traditions come from the story of this kind, gentle, generous man who is especially fond of children. St. Nicholas was born in a country called Turkey long, long ago. When he was a young man, he became very rich, and instead of spending it on himself, he used the money to help others in need. There was a family in his neighbourhood who were terribly poor, and the 3 daughters couldn't find husbands to look after them because they had no money, and their old father was too weak to work any longer. Their house was falling to pieces, and the windows had no glass. So one night, Nicholas took a bag of money and threw it in through the draughty opening. Next day, the father was very relieved, as one daughter could get married, but he had no idea who'd been so kind. But Nicholas knew he'd not yet done enough, so he went back the next night and threw another bag of money into the house, again without being seen. It was a miracle for the family, and the second daughter could marry as well. This only left one girl to be taken care of, so Nicholas went back again, but the windows had by this time been mended, and he couldn't throw the money in as he had done before. Nicholas tossed the bag of gold high into the air so it would fall down the chimney. Hung up by the mantelpiece were the girls' stockings, drying by the warmth of the fire. The money landed in a stocking, and you can imagine her surprise when she found it the next morning. This is just one of the many stories told about St. Nicholas, who always did good deeds in secret, and why it's traditional to hang up Christmas stockings. If you're very lucky, you might even find a bag of shining coins in your stocking on Christmas morning, but I don't expect you'll mind that they're made of chocolate. For children who live in Holland, St. Nicholas, or Sinterklaas as they call him, will visit them on the 6th of December with his helper, Black Peter. The children put out their shoes, filled with carrots for Sinterklaas's horse, and if they've been very good, by the morning the carrots will have gone and been replaced by sweets and presents. But if they've been naughty, Black Peter will leave a birch stick as a warning instead. Some people think that the feast of St. Nicholas is a very good day on which to write letters to Father Christmas to tell him the list of presents that they'd like. This gives him just the right amount of time to make sure that everybody gets at least one of the things that they've asked for when they wake up on Christmas morning. After the lovely story of St. Nicholas, our next Advent picture is a beautiful Christmas fireplace, complete with seasonal cards and colourful stockings. But it's a very different Christmas tradition we're looking at here, which began long before St. Nicholas showed such kindness to the poor. Now, if you look in the baker's shop this time of the year, one of the nicest things you can find to eat is a Christmas log made of chocolate Swiss roll and gooey icing. This represents the ancient Yule log that was once a really important part of the festivities. On Christmas Eve, folk would set off in search of a huge log that would burn in the fireplace until the holiday came to an end 12 days later. It would be lit with a piece of last year's Yule log, which people kept very safe with the leftover ashes. By continuing this tradition, not only might the family be warm throughout Christmas, but also they'd be protected from evil spirits all year long. Few people have real fires to sit by these days, but a chocolate Yule log is a very tasty way to celebrate this charming Christmas custom, and great fun to make, even with the youngest members of the family able to join in. As the 8th of December dawns, it's time to think about one of the most important Christmas tasks of them all. We need a Christmas tree, and for most families it'll take pride of place in the house throughout the celebrations. Whether you choose a sparkling silver imitation tree or a natural pine one that'll make your whole house smell lovely, the Christmas tree will put everybody into the Christmas spirit. It was one of England's most famous queens who's really responsible for promoting this great Christmas tradition back in Victorian times. Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, came from Germany, and people in his country had been bringing trees indoors to decorate at Christmas time for many years. So naturally, when he came to live in England and Christmas arrived, he brought a fir tree into the royal palace and had it decorated as a present for his English wife, Queen Victoria, who was absolutely delighted. Pictures of the Queen and her family gathered around the Christmas tree appeared in the popular newspapers of the day, and pretty soon every house in the land decorated a fir tree at Christmas time. It's one of the nicest of all the traditions that we celebrate, and it's remained a firm Christmas favourite throughout the ages, spreading far and wide the whole world over. If our 8th day of Advent shows a Christmas tree, the 9th has to be the lights that'll decorate it. Today there are all kinds of electric lights on sale for Christmas trees, and very pretty they all look. But this tradition started a very long time ago, when the only way to light up anything was by means of a candle. More than 400 years ago, a very important priest walked out into a pine forest on Christmas Eve and looked up at the night sky filled with twinkling stars. It was so beautiful that he tried to recreate the scene by decorating fir trees with candles, much to the delight of his congregation. Putting candles on Christmas trees was quite a tricky business, and it was also quite dangerous as well, because if a candle fell, it could quickly set the tree alight. This became more of a problem in Victorian times, when people brought bigger and bigger Christmas trees into their houses, sometimes needing 100 candles or more to cover this most festive of decorations. It usually fell to the younger children of the family to take it in turns to fire watch at the side of the lighted Christmas tree, with a strategically placed bucket of water to hand, in case of emergency. Fortunately, there are no such dangers with modern Christmas lights, and we can get the full effect of twinkling stars amongst the pine needles without any of the old-fashioned hazards. It's sometimes a bit frustrating when you're waiting to put all the other decorations on the tree, and the grown-ups seem to take forever to get the lights going. But just imagine how much worse it would have been to get 100 or more candles to stay in place. At least once the dud bulbs have all been replaced, you can just switch on and see the Christmas scene illuminated. I don't know what would have been worse, lighting all the candles in the beginning, or blowing them all out when it was time to go to bed. So, with a fine Christmas tree and twinkling lights already in place, our 10th Advent picture has to be a glittering bauble, spinning and dancing from its green pine branch. A very long time ago, there was a kingdom called Bohemia, where people were famous for making beautiful objects out of glass. One day, quite close to Christmas, the men had been very busy, and this had made them extremely thirsty. With nothing but beer to hand, by the time they'd finished their work, they were all a bit drunk, and decided to have a competition to see who could blow the largest glass bubble. After the winner had enjoyed even more beer, the glass bubbles they'd made were left in the workshop until one of the wives spotted them. She thought that the pretty balls would make lovely decorations, so she took them to sell them at the Christmas market. The glass bubbles became very popular and stories grew up around them. People called them spirit balls because it was said that they could ward off evil spirits for the year ahead if they were hung in the entrance to your house. These balls were much too large to hang on the Christmas trees that more and more folk were putting up year by year. With an eye for a good new money-making idea, the glass blowers of Bohemia started to create smaller glass balls with paper-thin walls that were light enough to hang from tree branches, and they were exported all over the world. Today, a Christmas tree couldn't be considered properly decorated without brightly coloured baubles, but very few of them are made of glass anymore. If your grandparents have some very old Christmas baubles in their boxes of decorations, it's just possible that some may be glass, but as time goes by, it's less likely. Our modern plastic baubles do look very authentic and are at least not quite as fragile as the glass variety, which had to be individually wrapped in tissue paper before they could be put away. The tree's now coming on very nicely, and for the 11th day of Advent, we've another beautiful decoration to adorn its branches. Tinsel comes in every colour you could possibly imagine, and you might think that this is a relatively modern addition to Christmas tree decorating. But like all the other stories we've been hearing in this programme, the idea of stringing brightly coloured garlands around the tree goes back a very long way. People from ancient times were very superstitious about trees, and every autumn when the leaves fell, they'd worry that they might never grow back again. This was because they believed that spirits lived in the trees, and when the leaves went, it was because the spirits had run away. To make sure that the spirits and the leaves came back again in the spring, strings of brightly painted stones and coloured cloth would be attached to the trees in the depths of winter. Of course, the leaves always returned, so the people thought that their tree dressing had worked, and over the centuries it became established as a custom. Although everyone soon found out that nature was responsible for the trees coming back to life, it didn't deter them from decorating trees in winter, and when they started to bring the Christmas tree indoors, they could use all sorts of decorations. Strings of paper flowers were very popular, and our modern-day tinsel certainly is a very attractive variation of the theme. It's the 12th day of Advent, and there's definitely something very important missing from our Christmas tree. There's nothing edible here, which we need to put right straight away. Look carefully at the tree, and you'll see some little gingerbread men hung on the branches. Christmas biscuits are very traditional in Germany, where the first Christmas trees came from. And in Sweden, lots of different types of biscuits are used for seasonal decorations. In this country, though, people are far more likely to have a tin of festive shortbread tucked under the tree to offer to their visitors. Although baking Christmas biscuits is a tradition that's now becoming more popular in Britain, Perhaps our most favourite edible decorations to hang on the Christmas tree are of the chocolate variety. All kinds of foil-wrapped shapes will brighten up the proceedings, but sadly, by the time we get to Christmas Day, they'll probably have all been eaten. Children everywhere really enjoy all the sweets you can find at Christmas time, and old-fashioned favourites, like these red and white-striped bullseyes, can often be found tucked into Christmas stockings. You might think, as we get to picture 13 of this very unusual Advent calendar, that the Christmas tree decorations have been completed. Lights, baubles, tinsel and goodies to eat, we've got them all. But what about the top of the tree? Which decoration is going to take pride of place? For some folk, it's always a Christmas angel that perches on the uppermost branch. But for others, the Christmas fairy is a far more popular choice. Yet in truth, both traditions actually stem from the same ancient custom, dating back hundreds of years. Again, we go to Germany, where a favourite early Christmas decoration was a little wax figure of the baby Jesus. These were hung all over the tree, and often a single larger version covered in gold was placed at the top. Over the centuries, this model of the Christ child sprouted wings and evolved into an angel. But the biggest change came with the Victorians, because he stopped being a boy and turned into a girl. The Victorian angels had lovely porcelain or wax faces, just like the dolls of the time that little girls loved to play with. And after Christmas, they'd be allowed to have the angel for a toy. Wings would be removed and pretty dresses added, and by the next Christmas, the angel was definitely female. Also, a new trend, Christmas pantomime was sweeping the country, and this always included a good fairy with a magic wand to make Christmas wishes come true. Everybody loved the good fairy, and she certainly graced many a fine Christmas tree. And to this day, people choose between the two options, even if on occasion it's quite hard to decide which is actually which. But for those who can't make up their minds whether to go for a fairy or an angel, there's always a Christmas star, like the one that shone over the Bethlehem stable where Jesus was born. It led the shepherds and wise men to bring gifts for the baby, so who knows? Perhaps a star would help direct Santa Claus to put presents under the Christmas tree for you. Our 14th Advent picture shows a very festive Christmas cracker. And a lot of people like to use these as decorations on their trees as well. But for most of us, Christmas crackers are usually associated with great festive meals to really get the party going with a bang. Crackers were invented by a Victorian gentleman who'd been on a visit to Paris. He saw sweets wrapped in brightly coloured papers, twisted at each end, that the French children called bonbons. This gave him a wonderful thought, and when he returned home, he made the first simple crackers that contained a sweet and a slip of paper with a motto or saying on it, an idea he'd got from Chinese fortune cookies. They were very popular, but the great inventor still wasn't absolutely satisfied. One night, when he was sat by the fire, a piece of wood cracked in the blaze, and he nearly jumped out of his skin. But he thought that if the crackers could go bang, just like the log had done, as they were pulled, it would be even more fun. As time went on, the sweets were replaced with little gifts, and the mottos became jokes and riddles. Another special addition was included. Tightly folded paper hats fell out of the pulled crackers, and everyone was able to wear a crown. Paper hats come from a tradition that's much older than the cracker, dating right back to Roman times. As part of the midwinter celebrations, masters and slaves would swap roles for a little while, and this custom was passed down through the ages. You might have heard people talking about Twelfth Night, which is the day when we take all the Christmas decorations down. But centuries ago, there would be huge parties held on this day. The tradition of master and slave swapping places continued at these gatherings as commoners were chosen to be kings and queens for the evening. They'd wear pretend crowns, and this is why the paper hats in crackers are shaped like crowns. Today, when we all pull our crackers and wear the paper hats, it's to make everyone feel like a king or a queen, if only for a day. Because we no longer have Twelfth Night celebrations, a lot of the customs have been transferred to Christmas itself, but we'll hear more about this a little later. Talking of wonderful Christmas meals, the 15th picture on this Advent calendar is very important indeed. What could be more festive than a steaming hot turkey carried to the table in all its golden glory? Turkey has been kept as a festive food, but it's not always been the centrepiece of the British Christmas dinner. For centuries, goose was served, and for the very rich, peacocks and even swans took centre stage on the Christmas table. In fact, it was Queen Victoria who first introduced turkey for the royal Christmas meal, because before this it had always been a swan. Her seal of approval was enough to make sure that turkey was the most popular bird for the great Christmas feast from Victorian times onwards. Our 16th Advent picture is also edible, but has been around at Christmas time for a lot longer than the turkey. The mince pie is very familiar to us all, but there's a lot more history to this simple little sweet pastry than you'd ever imagine. very first mince pies were not sweet at all, but savoury, and they were called Christmas pies. All kinds of meat such as pork, beef and chicken were shredded together and mixed with fruit to be baked in the pie. There's a famous nursery rhyme about little Jack Horner who sat in the corner eating his Christmas pie. He put in his thumb and pulled out a plum, and it was one of these very pies being described. But it wouldn't have been a round pie like we're used to seeing today. The Christmas pie was actually oblong-shaped to make it look like the manger that baby Jesus was cradled in, and usually a little baby figure was made out of pastry to decorate the top. This man is Oliver Cromwell, who hundreds of years ago was in charge of England, and he tried very hard to stop people celebrating Christmas. He thought it wasn't Christian to celebrate so wildly because he was very serious and religious. Cromwell and his followers thought that Christmas pies with baby Jesus on the top were very wicked indeed, and he actually had a law brought in that meant it was illegal to make or eat them. But ordinary folk didn't want to give up this much-loved tradition, so they just made a couple of alterations to get around the problem. Firstly, they changed the shape of the pie from rectangular to circular. And secondly, they called it a minced pie because of the minced meat it contained. Oliver Cromwell didn't stay in charge of England for very long, and soon everything, including Christmas, went back to how it had been before he came to power. But mince pies stayed around and never reverted to their old name. They also changed again during Victorian times as people stopped putting meat in them and just filled the pastry with sweet fruits and nuts. There are lots of legends about mince pies, and we still keep to the traditions to this very day. For example, you're allowed to make a wish when you take your first bite of your first mince pie at the beginning of Christmas. But you have to be careful not to refuse the first mince pie you're offered, because if you do, then you'll have bad luck for the coming year. Some people think that you'll have good luck if you eat a mince pie on each of the 12 days of Christmas. But for it really to work, you must eat each one in a different house. Of course, this might just be a good excuse for doing lots of Christmas visiting, particularly as folk usually offer a glass of sherry to wash down these modern versions of the traditional Christmas pie. If there's a lot of ancient customs surrounding mince pies, the 17th of December brings an even more traditional Christmas treat. A flaming Christmas pudding, decorated with a sprig of spiky holly, is a sight to behold at the end of the Christmas dinner. Not everyone likes this rich, fruity pudding, particularly the very young, but you don't have to eat it to appreciate that it's really quite spectacular. But the Christmas pudding's origins were not nearly so grand. It started life back in ancient Celtic times as a kind of porridge, bubbling constantly in honour of one of their gods. Everyone had to stir the great pot for the god to bless them all with a good harvest in the year ahead. over the centuries, people made the porridge more exciting by adding meat and fruit to the mix. Eventually, it became more like the pudding we know today, especially when they stopped putting in meat. We still prepare Christmas pudding very carefully, mixing all the ingredients together some weeks before the big day. Stir-up Sunday was always set aside for the purpose, and every member of the family had a turn at stirring the Christmas pudding mix, just like the ancient Celts stirred their porridge such a long time ago, and it's a tradition that continues. But beware! You must always stir the pudding clockwise, making a wish as you go. To stir it anti-clockwise, or widdershins as the Old English word describes it, is very bad luck indeed. You might also find something you didn't expect in your Christmas pudding, because another tradition involves hiding objects in the mix. Find a coin and you'll have wealth for the year ahead. A ring and you'll meet the person that you're going to marry. But find a thimble and your lot will not be such a happy one, because you will remain unmarried and have to work much harder. Christmas cakes are made of very similar ingredients, but have a rather different history to the puddings. We've already talked a little bit about Twelfth Night, and the Christmas cake actually started out as a Twelfth Night cake. People would decide who was going to be king and queen of the festivities by cutting the cake in half and hiding a tiny bean in each portion. One half was given to the ladies and the other to the men, and if you found the bean in your slice of cake, you became the king or queen of the party and got to wear a paper crown. But these parties got very wild and boisterous, and Queen Victoria, who was quite a prim and proper lady, was definitely not amused, and she banned Twelfth Night celebrations altogether. Rather than lose this Twelfth Night cake, which everybody really enjoyed, it was moved to Christmas to give us the cake we know and love today. A layer of yellow marzipan and snowy white icing completes the effect, and the addition of Santa Claus, reindeer, snowmen and Christmas trees make it all the more festive. It's really difficult to work out what this flaming 18th Advent picture actually is, and that's because it's a very old Christmas game called Snapdragon that isn't played anymore, and when you hear what's involved, you'll understand why. Once all the feasting on Christmas dinner was finished, and remember, there was no television to settle down in front of back then, games were very definitely the order of the rest of the day. The table was cleared, and the largest dish in the house was put in the middle and filled with dried fruit such as sultanas and raisins. Then, if it was still light, all the curtains would be drawn to darken the room, and the fruit was covered in brandy. Can you guess what happened next? The pile of fruit was set alight, and the flames brightened the whole place. Everybody would then have to take it in turns to snatch a handful of the flaming fruit and quickly eat it without burning their fingers or their mouths. It sounds very scary, but Snapdragon was extremely popular, and if you weren't brave enough to grab the fruit yourself, it was great fun to watch those that did, jumping around with mouthfuls of hot fruit. Fortunately, not all of the old Christmas games were as dangerous as Snapdragon, and a lot of them have survived to the present day. Lots of families liked to play card games, and even now a Christmas get-together is still a good excuse for some friendly competition. Many games were better played with large numbers of people, so Christmas proved a perfect opportunity to indulge. Blind Man's Buff was always a favourite, with simple pleasures like Hunt the Thimble and musical chairs keeping adults and children entertained for many happy hours. These games are still played, but more often than not at children's birthday parties. But at Christmas now, board games seem to be more to people's taste. This is perhaps because we all live in much smaller places these days, and folk gathered around a table can be much easier to accommodate than hordes of excitable partygoers running all over the house. But if you do get a chance to play a noisy, boisterous, old-fashioned game, make the most of it. So long, of course, that it isn't Snapdragon. It's now the 19th day of December, and Christmas is getting very, very close. Our picture is of everyone's most favourite person this time of the year. You don't need anyone to tell you that this is Santa Claus, taking a well-earned few minutes rest at this very busy time of the year. All the letters asking for all sorts of presents have arrived from boys and girls all over the world, and he's not got long to collect all the goodies together. He can't run out of things now, can he? And of course everything needs to be wrapped up in brightly coloured paper with the right name tag attached. So many names to remember, and he's got to get all the spellings right. Have a good look around, and who knows what you might find. Do you think Santa's just about ready for Christmas Eve? It looks like he's just got a few last-minute things to finish, and then it'll be time to get started on his amazing journey. And as the 20th day of Advent dawns, the picture we see is a present, beautifully decorated and ready for Christmas morning. But have you ever wondered why we have presents at Christmas time? It's a tradition that goes back a lot further than even Santa Claus. We've talked a little bit already about how Christmas was a midwinter festival at a time when food was very precious, so exchanging gifts of the edible variety was very much appreciated. Each farmer specialised in different things, so swapping what had been produced was a lovely way to celebrate, and the exchange of gifts at Christmas time has carried on this wonderful seasonal custom ever since. You might have wondered why the day after Christmas is called Boxing Day, and this is all to do with presents as well. Long, long ago, when ships used to set out to sea, not knowing whether they would fall off the edge of the world or not, a priest would bless a small box and place it on board. The sailors, when they got afraid, would say a prayer and drop coins and trinkets into the box. If they returned safely, they would give the box back to the priest, who kept it in the church until Christmas Day, when it was opened. Next morning, the money was distributed to the poor, and very soon this became known as Boxing Day. Being generous to poor people is a tradition that continues to be associated with Christmas, even though Christmas boxes are now a thing of the past. Boxing Day is still a very good time to think of others after having lots of lovely presents on Christmas morning. Christmas is almost here. It's the 21st of December, and our journey is now taking us further northwards because everyone knows that you need to go to Lapland if you want to find Santa Claus. This beautiful snow scene is deep in the Arctic Circle, and people really do dream of a white Christmas here. But in England, it's highly unlikely that there'll be snow on Christmas Day. In the whole of the 1900s, there were only 2 white Christmases recorded in London. So why does everybody always think of snow when they think of Christmas? There was a great English writer called Charles Dickens who lived during Queen Victoria's reign. His books were very famous indeed, and the one you've most probably heard of is called A Christmas Carol. Whenever Charles Dickens wrote about Christmas, he always made it snowy. And because his books were so beautifully written, that's how people always imagined it to be. There's a very good reason why Charles Dickens did this. He was born in 1812, and for the first 8 years of his life, it snowed every Christmas. So when he grew up, each time he wrote about Christmas, he thought of his snowy childhood memories. Even today, his Christmas stories are still read at this very special time of the year. And should you never get to see snow at Christmas time, Charles Dickens's wonderful books will be able to help you to enjoy the experience. Ebenezer Scrooge was a mean old miser who thought that Christmas was nothing but humbug. "If I could work my will," said Scrooge indignantly, "every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart, he should." This is not a good start to the Christmas festivities, particularly for Scrooge's poor clerk, Bob Cratchit, who has a wife and family he would like to be with on Christmas Day. He also has a crippled son, Tiny Tim, who is very ill and might not live to see another Christmas. When Scrooge is alone in his bed, he's visited by the ghost of his dead business partner, Jacob Marley, who is wrapped in chains, weighed down with his burdens. The chain he drew was clasped around his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made, for Scrooge observed it closely, of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. Marley had come to warn Scrooge that if he didn't change his ways, he would end up in the same predicament. 3 spirits then visit Scrooge, the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, who show him what he must do to save himself and others around him. The first spirit appeared like a child, dressed in white, carrying fresh green holly. "Who and what are you?" Scrooge demanded. "I am the ghost of Christmas past." "Long past?" inquired Scrooge, observant of its dwarfish stature. "No, your past." The ghost takes Scrooge back to when he was a boy and reminds him of how he lost out on love. "Spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place." "I told you these were shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost, "that they are what they are. Do not blame me." "Remove me!" Scrooge exclaimed. "I cannot bear it." The second ghost is the spirit of Christmas present, who takes Scrooge to see Christmas at Bob Cratchit's house, where Tiny Tim is failing fast. He sat very close to his father's side, upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he loved the child, and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him. "Spirit," said Scrooge, with an interest he had never felt before, "tell me if Tiny Tim will live." "I see a vacant seat," replied the ghost, "in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die." "No, no," said Scrooge. "Oh, no, kind spirit, say he'll be spared." A definite change of heart for Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge, and by the time the ghost of Christmas yet to come arrived to take Scrooge to see his own grave, the old miser is resolved to change his ways. He immediately sets out to make amends to all, and especially to his faithful servant, Bob Cratchit, hoping against hope that he will be in time to save Tiny Tim. "A Merry Christmas, Bob!" said Scrooge with an earnestness that could not be mistaken, as he clapped him on the back. "A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavour to assist your struggling family." Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us, everyone.
Our next Advent picture for the 22nd of December is a husky dog that's well used to such Arctic conditions. It's quite hard to travel around in this deep snow, and a team of husky dogs pulling a sledge is a very good way to get to where you have to go. We do think about animals quite a lot at Christmas time, perhaps because so many of them were in the stable where baby Jesus was born. With this very special connection to the Nativity, some people believe that on Christmas Eve the animals can speak, and others have reported seeing cattle and donkeys bowing down in their fields as the clock strikes midnight. But whether such things really did happen, or the stories have been exaggerated as they've been handed down through history, nobody can say. The only thing we do know for certain is the fact that families with pets like to give special treats to their animals at Christmas time, and it's a very traditional custom that's been going on for centuries. The excitement is now almost unbearable. It's the 23rd of December, and this next Advent picture really makes everyone think that Santa is on his way. Here in Lapland, you'll see plenty of reindeer. And we all know who travels around the world on Christmas Eve in a sleigh pulled by magical flying reindeer. All sorts of stories and poems have been written about Father Christmas and his reindeer, so you'd better look out to see if any of these reindeer have particularly red noses. We don't get a chance to see real reindeer very often, so take a closer look at these wonderful animals in their natural environment. If you prefer, you can try and stay awake on Christmas Eve to watch out for Santa and his reindeer flying through the night sky. But they're very fast indeed. One sleepy blink and you'd probably miss them. And so at last, we come to December the 24th, Christmas Eve itself. For children everywhere, the prospect of waking to find a pile of presents left by Santa Claus is just too exciting. But the preparations are not quite complete. We've talked about mince pies already, and we must make sure that the visitors haven't eaten them all, because there must be one remaining to leave out for Santa. He's had a very busy night, travelling from place to place, and a glass of sherry and a mince pie makes the perfect snack wherever he stops. And don't forget the reindeer, whatever you do. They're not so fond of mince pies, and certainly can't have any sherry with all the driving that they've got to do. A few carrots should do the trick, and some people say that a saucer of milk goes down a treat. But And you might have your own ideas about what to leave out for Father Christmas when he comes to visit, because nobody knows for sure what the jolly old chap and his reindeer really like, and all those mince pies and carrots might just get a little bit boring. The next thing that you must decide upon is what to put out at the foot of your bed for Santa Claus to put your presents into. Stockings are very popular, and these days you can get lovely brightly coloured ones that are nice and stretchy, perfect for all those awkward shaped gifts. But there are even bigger options that you can try. A lot of families will hang up pillowcases or even sacks. This one has a lovely picture of St. Nicholas on it, so there's no mistaking what it's for, and hopefully it'll make Santa Claus feel very welcome indeed. We can't promise that you'll get more presents if you hang out a pillowcase or a sack rather than a stocking, because Father Christmas is a pretty smart fellow, and he's got everyone's gifts all worked out before he even leaves his snowy Lapland home. And so to bed, on Christmas Eve. Everything is done, and all you can do is close your eyes, fall asleep, and dream of Christmas morning. But when we started this very special Advent journey, we promised you magic and mystery, and we haven't quite finished yet. How many of us, young and old alike, drift off into peaceful Christmas slumbers, wishing they could travel to Lapland and see Santa Claus? Well, now's your chance. Have a very happy Christmas, and whatever you do, remember to hold on tight.
Vetto! Olimpan, bene! Olimpan,